On the Saturday, I pulled into the gravel drive and found my daughter, Claire Hart, weeping over a sink of cloudy dishwater. I realized I'd made the worst mistake of my life. Her hands were submerged to the wrists, raw and red. Her shoulders folded the way a flag falls when the wind dies. Behind her, in the open-plan living room, I had imagined as her sanctuary, the Bennett family lounged like they owned the place. Lorraine with her cool, measuring eyes, Brooke and Paige with their careless laughter, Kyle and Jenna, corralling children who trailed crumbs and toys like a storm. "Claire, the tea is cold," Lorraine called without looking up. "Make another pot." My daughter nodded as if she were the hired help. She didn't see me in the doorway at first. I stood there long enough to hear the orders, the clatter, the small humiliations that sand a woman down until there's nothing smooth left to touch. 6 months earlier, I had bought this acreage for Claire with money I'd saved across 30 years as a bookkeeper. 5 acres, 3 bedrooms, a kitchen window that frames the guava tree in morning light. I gave her the keys and told her the deed carried one name, hers. "A place where no one can make you small," I said. Yet here she was, made small in the place I swore would protect her. When she finally turned and saw me, something in her face flickered relief, fear, and a question. "Will you help me, or will you make it worse?" I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. The sound was soft, final like a verdict. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Some battles you win with volume. This one would require precision. When Claire left her first marriage, she was 43 and looked 80. The light in her eyes had dimmed. Her shoulders were permanently drawn inward, as though she was always expecting another blow that would never come, but always did in invisible ways. Her husband, Patrick, never hit her. He didn't need to. He used words like knives, sharp, clean, and designed to leave wounds no one could see. For 18 years, she lived in that house like a shadow. He would disappear into his office for hours, then emerge only to criticize the smallest things. The way she cooked, the way she laughed, the way she breathed. And she believed him because that's what happens when you love a man who slowly convinces you that your existence is an inconvenience. When the divorce finally came, Patrick made sure she left with nothing. He had the house in his name, the savings tied to his business, even the little blue car I'd given her for her 30th birthday listed under joint marital property. He took it all. Claire came to me with 2 suitcases, an overdrawn bank account, and a silence that could fill a cathedral. I remember the first morning she stayed with me. She sat at my kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee. She didn't drink the steam rising and fading before she even moved. "I wasted half my life," she said finally. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. "No, I told her you invested it. And now it's time to collect what's left." For months, she drifted around my apartment like a ghost. She'd start a sentence and forget the rest. She'd stand by the window watching traffic, and I could tell she was trying to understand how the world kept turning when hers had stopped. She cried at night when she thought I was asleep. Sometimes I'd hear her whispering apologies, to no one in particular. I tried to stay patient. Healing isn't linear. Some days she cooked breakfast and made jokes. Others, she barely spoke at all. I knew that look because I'd worn it once myself, years ago when her father died and left me to raise her alone. Life had made me hard in places, but never cold. And I knew that if Claire was ever going to find herself again, she needed a place that felt like hers, not borrowed, not pitied hers. At that time, I was 70. I had spent my entire adult life as a bookkeeper for a small manufacturing firm. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Every month, I tucked away a little into a savings account. Not much, just enough to feel safe when the time came to stop working. My retirement fund was supposed to be my safety net. But every time I saw my daughter staring at nothing, I knew that money could do more than collect dust for my old age. It could build her a new life. One Saturday afternoon, I sat down at my desk and opened a folder where I'd kept notes on small properties outside the city. I had been browsing them for years, dreaming of a quiet piece of land with fruit trees and space to breathe. It wasn't for me anymore. It was for her. I found it 2 weeks later, 5 acres just beyond the city limits, a small house, painted cream with a porch that caught the morning sun. The price tag read $52,000. My hands shook as I signed the loan papers for the remaining $7,000. For the first time in decades, I was taking a risk not for myself, but for my child. When I showed the place to Claire, she didn't speak. She just walked from room to room, touching the walls, running her fingers along the windowsills, as if she couldn't believe they were real. The kitchen window faced a guava tree, heavy with fruit. The air smelled of earth and sweetness. "Is it really mine?" she whispered finally. "Yours," I told her, "and no one else's." She cried, then the deep shaking kind of cry that comes from somewhere below words. I held her, and for a moment I felt her heart beating against mine like it used to when she was small. I remember thinking, maybe this is what healing looks like. We spent the next month fixing the place together. I painted the living room while she planted roses out front. Every night we ate sandwiches on the porch, planning how she'd fill her new life. She wanted to bake again, maybe sell pies at the local market. "People always smile around baked goods," she said. "You can't cry while smelling cinnamon." I laughed. It was the first time I'd heard hope in her voice in years. When I finally handed her the keys and drove away, I looked back and saw her standing on the porch in the fading light. She waved small and grateful. I thought I had given her safety. I didn't realize I had also given her the stage for the next heartbreak. 6 months later, she called me with excitement. "I met someone, Mom. Someone, his name is Daniel Bennett. He's kind. He listens." I wanted to believe her. After everything she'd endured, she deserved a good man. Daniel seemed harmless enough, polite, soft-spoken, with that steady way of talking that makes you feel safe. He worked in real estate, said he wanted a quiet life. He told me he adored Claire's independence. I wanted to believe every word. They married quickly, too quickly if I'm honest. 4 months after they met, she called to say the wedding would be small, just family. I remember standing in the mirror that day, brushing my silver hair and whispering, "Please, God, let this one be gentle." For a while he was. The first months were full of dinners, photos, laughter. Claire told me Daniel was different, that he made her feel cherished. She didn't mention the family much, only that they lived out of town, that his mother Lorraine was a little opinionated, but means well. I should have heard the warning in that sentence. It began subtly. A weekend visit that turned into a week. A temporary stay that became indefinite. Each time, Daniel said yes. Each time, Claire told me it was fine that they were family. When I visited one Sunday, the house looked smaller. Not physically, but spiritually. There were toys scattered across the floor, suitcases in the hall, strange shoes by the door. Claire's laughter sounded forced. "They just need a place for a while," she said, avoiding my eyes. I nodded, though my stomach tightened. I'd seen this before, the quiet occupation of a woman's space until she forgets it's hers. By the time I returned that fateful Saturday, Lorraine Bennett and her brood had made themselves the landlords of the acreage I bought with my life savings. They treated Claire not as a wife or daughter-in-law, but as unpaid staff in their family hotel. And Claire, sweet, soft, Claire had reverted to that same frightened silence I thought we'd buried with her first marriage. She was serving them breakfast, washing their dishes, apologizing for things that weren't her fault. That morning, standing in her kitchen doorway, I understood something terrible. My daughter hadn't escaped abuse. She had only changed its address. I had built her a home to heal, and they had turned it into a cage. I looked at her cracked hands at the coffee pot, trembling in her grip, and I made myself a promise I hadn't made in years. No one, no man, no mother-in-law, no family was ever going to make my daughter small again. Not in my house. Not while I still had breath in my body. When I stepped fully into that kitchen, Lorraine Bennett turned toward me with the sweet, poisonous smile of a woman who had already claimed victory. Evelyn. She said, her voice smooth as butter left too long in the sun. What a surprise. We didn't know you were coming today. I could feel my pulse in my throat. It's my daughter's home, I said quietly. I don't need an invitation. She tilted her head, the corners of her mouth curling. Of course. Technically, it's their home now, Claire and my son Daniel. What belongs to one belongs to the other. Her words were polite, but her eyes were sharp, measuring how far she could push, before I snapped. Behind her, Brooke and Paige were draped across the sofa, like they were in a spa, feet up on the coffee table. I'd helped Claire sand and stain by hand. Kyle sat near the window, scrolling on his phone, while his wife Jenna yelled at the children who were running wild through the house. Toys, crumbs, sticky fingerprints everywhere. And in the middle of all that chaos, my daughter stood at the stove like a servant. Claire, these eggs are cold, Lorraine announced, without even glancing up from her cup of tea. I'm sorry, Claire whispered. I'll make more. Good girl, Lorraine said. And that was the moment I felt something inside me fracture. I had spent 70 years trying to live with grace. But grace, I was beginning to realize, only works on people who have shame. Claire, I said, keeping my eyes on Lorraine, come here. She hesitated, looking between us like a child, caught between her teacher and a bully. I'm busy, Mom, she said softly. I need to finish cleaning up breakfast. Let someone else clean it. I said, my voice calm but ironclad. Now please, Lorraine laughed. A short, cruel sound. Oh, Evelyn, don't be dramatic. She's just helping out. We're family after all. Families help each other. I looked around the room at the mess, the indifference, the way no one lifted a finger, and thought, no, families don't do this. Parasites do. How long have you all been here? I asked. 2 weeks, Lorraine said easily. And we'll stay all summer. Daniel invited us. He said there's plenty of room. 2 weeks. 2 weeks my daughter had lived like this and hadn't said a word. And where is Daniel? I asked. He went out with his father, Lorraine replied, settling deeper into the couch as if she were queen of a conquered land. They'll be back for lunch. Speaking of which, Claire, it's nearly 11. You should start preparing something. You know my son doesn't like to eat late. I looked at Claire. My Claire moving like a wind-up doll, obeying every command. Her wrists were red and raw from scrubbing her nails, broken her face, pale from exhaustion. Claire, I said softly, come outside with me, please. Lorraine's daughters exchanged smirks. Paige muttered, here we go, under her breath. I didn't respond. I simply took my daughter's hand and led her out through the back door into the garden I'd once planted, with her roses, wild lavender, the guava tree swaying gently in the breeze. We reached the old swing I'd hung the week she moved in. I made her sit. I knelt before her, ignoring the ache in my knees, and took her rough hands in mine. Tell me everything, I said. It took a moment. Then the dam broke. She sobbed, loud, ragged sobs that seemed to tear something loose inside her. I don't even know how it happened, Mom, she said between gasps. At first, everything was perfect. Daniel was so kind, so different from Patrick. I thought I'd finally done something right. And then his mother started visiting. Just little things at first. A weekend at dinner. Daniel said she meant well. I believed him. I listened without interrupting. Then 3 weeks ago, she called. Claire continued. She said her landlord raised the rent, and she needed a place to stay for a few days. I didn't want to, but how could I say no? It's his mother. She came with 2 suitcases. Then Brooke showed up, said she broke up with her boyfriend. Then Paige arrived because her apartment was being remodeled. Then Kyle came with Jenna and the kids. And Daniel, he just kept saying yes. Every time I tried to protest, he told me I was overreacting. Overreacting, I repeated slowly. Yes, she said. Lorraine keeps saying a good wife takes care of her husband's family. That it's tradition. That I should be grateful to have them here. And I started to believe her. I thought maybe I was selfish. Maybe I didn't know what real families were like, because it was always just you and me. Those words hit me like a physical blow. My daughter, my brilliant, capable daughter, had been gaslit into believing kindness meant servitude. Claire, I said, taking her chin in my hands, forcing her to look at me. Listen to me. None of this is normal. None of it is right. Family doesn't exploit you. Family doesn't make you cry in your own kitchen. But Mom, she whispered, we're married. What's mine is his. I smiled sadly. That's where you're wrong. I made sure of that. The deed is in your name only. I told Attorney Carter when I bought the acreage, I wanted it solely under Claire Hart. Not even I am listed. You earned this house with your pain, and no one is taking it from you. Her eyes widened. For the first time that morning, a flicker of power returned to her face. You mean legally it's yours, I said, completely, which means you decide who stays and who leaves? I can't kick them out, she said weakly. Daniel would never forgive me. Has he forgiven you for crying yourself to sleep every night? I asked. Has he defended you once she didn't answer? She didn't have to. I stood, brushing the dirt from my knees. Come on, I said. Let's go remind them whose house this is. Mom, please, she whispered, fear flooding her voice. Don't make things worse. Worse, I repeated. The worst already happened. Now we fix it. We walked back inside. The living room was louder than before. TV blaring, children shouting, Lorraine ordering coffee as if the house were her personal cafe. When she saw us, Lorraine smiled lazily. Ah, there you are, Claire. I was just telling Brooke we need fresh tea. I stepped between them and the television, grabbed the remote, and turned it off. The room went silent. What do you think you're doing? Lorraine snapped. Taking back what's ours, I said. This house belongs to my daughter. You're guests here, and it's time you started acting like it. Lorraine rose slowly, her expression twisting. Your daughter's married to my son. That makes this our home too. No, I said calmly. It doesn't. The property was acquired before the marriage. Daniel has no legal claim to it. If you don't believe me, I can call my attorney right now. She laughed, a brittle mocking sound, but I could see the flicker of unease in her eyes. You wouldn't, she said. Watch me. I pulled out my phone and dialed Attorney Carter. I put the call on speaker. Good morning, Miss Hart. His voice rang through the room. What can I do for you? I need you to confirm the ownership details of the acreage I purchased last year. I said loud enough for everyone to hear. It's solely in your daughter's name, he said. No joint owners. If anyone refuses to leave after being asked, that's trespassing. Lorraine's jaw tightened. Thank you, I said, ending the call. You heard the man. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave. You can't be serious, Brooke sputtered. Daniel invited us. Then Daniel can find you a hotel, I replied. But you're done turning this house into your vacation lodge. Lorraine took a step closer, her perfume cloying, her smile gone. You'll regret this, Evelyn. You're destroying your daughter's marriage. If defending her destroys it, I said, then it wasn't worth saving. The air between us crackled with something dangerous, age against arrogance, mother against manipulator. For a long moment, no one moved. Then finally, Lorraine broke the stare, turning toward her daughters. "Pack up," she hissed. "Now!" As they scattered, I looked at Claire. She was trembling, tears in her eyes. But beneath the fear, there was something else: relief. This wasn't over, I knew. The real battle would come when Daniel returned. But for now, the silence that filled that house wasn't fear anymore. It was freedom, learning how to breathe again. After the Bennetts scattered like startled crows, the house sank into a strange stillness. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the slow tick of the wall clock above the stove, the shallow sound of my daughter's breathing behind me. For 2 weeks, this place had been a circus full of shouting and commands. Now, for the first time in days, there was silence. Claire stood by the sink, staring down at her own reflection in the soapy water. Her hand shook as she reached for the towel. "What have you done, Mom?" she whispered. "What I should have done the first day I saw them here," I answered. She turned to me, her eyes red and terrified. "Daniel's going to be furious. He'll say you embarrassed his family. He'll say, I let you control everything." I took a slow breath, the kind you take before saying something you can't unsay. If a man's love depends on you allowing yourself to be mistreated, then it isn't love, it's captivity. Her lips trembled. She looked away as if my words were too heavy to hold. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple," I said gently. "It's survival." I began picking up the abandoned plates, stacking them neatly on the counter. Doing something practical gave me time to think. Every movement calmed my rage, turned it into focus. Because anger without direction is just noise, and I've lived long enough to know that silence used wisely is far more dangerous. We cleaned in silence for a while. I could see in Claire's face that she was replaying everything: Lorraine's orders, Brooke's laughter, Paige's insults, Daniel's indifference. Trauma has a way of looping like a broken record until someone lifts the needle. After a while, she said softly, "They'll tell Daniel I'm ungrateful, that I disrespected his mother, that you humiliate them." "Let them," I replied. "The truth doesn't stop being true just because liars speak louder." She didn't answer, but her eyes softened. For the first time since I arrived, she stood a little straighter. By noon, the house was half cleared. The Bennetts were packing upstairs, slamming doors and muttering insults, but I didn't go up. I didn't need to. I'd already made the call to Attorney Carter, confirming everything in writing. The property was in Claire's name, legally purchased before the marriage, private ownership without spousal rights. Still, I wanted to be thorough. I took out my phone and photographed the deed that hung framed in Claire's office, her name printed clearly across the top. I also took pictures of the chaos they'd left behind: the broken lamp, the stained carpet, the pile of unpaid grocery receipts she covered out of her own account. Not for revenge, just for record. Evidence is the quiet ally of women who've been called emotional. I brewed tea and handed her a cup. "Drink," I said. "You'll need your strength when Daniel gets here." She stared at the steam rising from the cup. "What if he tells me to apologize?" "Then you ask him why I said. And you keep asking until he runs out of answers." She almost smiled. "You make it sound like I can win." I leaned against the counter. "You already did." You stood up. That afternoon stretched long and slow. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting stripes of gold across the living room floor. I could hear the sound of luggage being dragged across the porch, children whining, Lorraine's sharp voice cutting through the air. "You'll regret this, Claire. Do you hear me? You'll regret it? Claire flinched, but I touched her arm. Don't answer, I said. Bullies thrive on response. She nodded, swallowing hard. When the last car door slammed and the engines faded down the gravel road, we stood at the window together, watching the dust settle. The silence that followed was almost sacred. Claire turned to me. I don't know what happens now, I said. We prepare. Prepare for what? For when he comes home, I replied, because he will come home angry, confused, full of his mother's words. And when he does, you will not cry. You will not apologize. You will not justify what you did. You will stand calm and clear, and you will tell him exactly how his family treated you. Facts, not feelings. That's how you win. Her mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to argue, but instead, she just nodded. We spent the next few hours restoring the house to order. It was more than cleaning, it was reclaiming. We washed the sheets, aired out the rooms, opened the curtains. The air smelled fresher, lighter, like something toxic had finally been released. At one point, Claire found the old swing out back the ropes, still damp from the morning dew. She sat on it while I swept the porch. Do you think Daniel ever really loved me? She asked quietly. I think he loved the idea of being a good man, I said. And I think you wanted so badly to believe in that idea that you didn't notice when it stopped being true. She looked down, pushing at the dirt with her foot. That's a hard thing to admit. The truth always is, I said. Inside, I made a list. Old habits from bookkeeping die hard. On one side, I wrote what they took. Peace, boundaries, self-respect. On the other side, I wrote what we take back. Legal rights, voice, home. It wasn't for the court, it was for Claire. Sometimes you need to see your power written down before you can believe in it again. Around 5, she went to shower. I sat at the table watching the sunlight fade and dialed Attorney Carter one more time. Everything's in place, I asked. Yes, he said. If anyone tries to contest the property or refuses to leave, call the police immediately. Trespassing laws are on your side. Thank you, I said. And if Daniel tries to claim ownership, he can't, Carter said. Not without a signed transfer or prenuptial amendment. You were smart to protect her, Ms. Hart. Smart. The word felt heavy. I hadn't felt particularly smart. Just tired of watching women I loved be erased. When I hung up, I poured myself another cup of tea and sat quietly. There was no satisfaction in what I'd done, only resolve. I thought of my own mother, a woman who'd once told me, silence can be armor, or it can be a cage. Choose what kind you wear. I had worn silence as armor my whole life. But for Claire, I turned it into a blade. By evening, the house was spotless. The dishes gleamed, the air smelled like lemon soap, and the guava tree outside glowed in the amber light of sunset. Claire came down the stairs wearing fresh clothes, her hair damp and tied back. She looked younger, lighter, like someone who'd just woken from a long sleep. Mom, she said softly. Thank you. I shook my head. Don't thank me yet. The hardest part is coming. She frowned. You mean when Daniel gets here? Yes. You love him. That makes this harder. But remember, love that demands silence is not love. It's debt. She nodded slowly, repeating the words to herself like a prayer. At 6:30, the sound of an engine rolled up the drive. The headlights swept across the living room wall. Claire froze. Breathe, I whispered. He's just a man. And this is your house. We stood there together as the car door opened, gravel crunching under footsteps. I could see Daniel's silhouette in the fading light, broad shoulders, confident stride. He didn't look like a villain. That's the problem with men like him. They rarely do. He walked up to the porch and opened the door without knocking. His eyes landed on me, first, then on Claire. What the hell is going on? Dinner's ready, I said calmly. And so is the truth. Daniel stopped just inside the doorway, the last streak of sunlight cutting across his face. Where's my family? He asked, his voice calm but tight. Gone, I said. They packed their things this afternoon. His eyebrows shot up. You what? You threw them out? No, I replied evenly. I reminded them they were guests, not owners. There's a difference. He turned to Claire, his expression shifting from disbelief to anger. Claire, please tell me this isn't true. Tell me my mother misunderstood. Claire's hands trembled against the fabric of her dress. Daniel, she began softly. They've been here for 2 weeks. They took over everything. I couldn't. He cut her off. They're my family. You knew what that meant when you married me. I didn't know it meant being their maid, she said. Her voice cracked, but she didn't look away. I didn't know. Love came with servitude. The words hung between them like smoke. I stayed quiet. Some lessons can't be taught by mothers. They have to be spoken by daughters who finally find their voice. Daniel rubbed his temple, pacing. You could have called me Claire. You could have said something before this. I tried, she whispered, 3 times. You told me I was overreacting. You told me they were just being helpful. You told me to be patient. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence that followed was louder than shouting. I stepped forward, my tone measured. Daniel, the deed to this property is in Claire's name alone. I confirmed it with Attorney Carter. Your family had no legal or moral right to stay once she asked them to leave. He stared at me as if trying to decide whether to argue law or pride. You had no right to interfere, Evelyn. I had every right, I said quietly, because I bought this home for her safety. And what I found today wasn't safety. It was servitude. He flinched, the word servitude landing like a stone. From outside came the faint echo of tires on gravel. The Bennett's cars disappearing down the road for good. Daniel turned toward the sound, then back to his wife. My mother will never forgive this, he said. Claire's chin lifted an inch. Then she'll have to live with it. I'm done apologizing for wanting peace in my own home. I watched pride and fear wrestle across his face. He'd spent his life orbiting a woman who measured love in obedience. Now he was realizing that orbit might finally collapse. He sank into a chair, elbows on his knees. I didn't see it, he murmured. I really didn't see what she was doing to you. No, Claire said, her voice softer now. You chose not to. He looked up at her eyes, wet. I'm sorry. The apology wasn't grand. It was small, raw, real. The kind that comes when denial finally cracks open. I placed a hand on the back of a chair and exhaled. It's late, I said. You two need to talk. No yelling, no blaming, just truth. If this marriage has any chance of surviving, it starts tonight. Daniel nodded slowly. It will, he said. It has to. Claire looked at me, a silent question in her eyes. Will you stay? I shook my head. No, darling. You don't need a witness anymore. You just need your voice. When I stepped onto the porch, the night air was cool, the guava trees swaying gently. Behind me, through the open window, I heard the low murmur of their voices. No shouting, no orders, just 2 people finally speaking like equals. For the first time that day, I smiled. Not because the battle was over, but because my daughter was finally learning how to fight it herself. The next morning dawned pale and quiet. Mist hung low over the garden, curling through the guava branches like smoke. I woke early, made coffee, and sat on the porch waiting for what always comes after confrontation, the reckoning. It didn't take long. Around 8, Claire appeared at the door. Her face looked tired, but different, steadier somehow. He's still asleep, she said. We talked half the night. And I asked. He listened, she said simply. For the first time, he didn't defend her. He cried, Mom. He said he'd been blind, that he'd confused control for care his whole life. I nodded. That's how it works. A mother's manipulation never looks like cruelty until you see the bruises it leaves on someone else. She came to sit beside me. For a while, we just watched the morning light push through the fog. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Do you think she'll come back? Yes, I said. Because people like Lorraine don't know how to lose gracefully. But this time she'll find the door locked. Later that afternoon, the phone started ringing. Lorraine's number flashing again and again. First to Daniel, then to Claire. No one answered. A few hours later, the text messages came first. Soft, then angry, then desperate. You've been poisoned against me. I did everything for you. You'll regret this. Daniel sat at the table, reading them, his face pale. She's never going to stop, he said quietly. She will. I told him when she realizes guilt doesn't work anymore. He looked up, eyes red from sleeplessness. I think I broke her heart. No, I said gently. You broke her control. There's a difference. That night, the doorbell rang. We knew who it was before we opened it. Lorraine stood on the porch, her hair uncombed, mascara, smudged fury, and sorrow fighting across her face. Daniel, she said, voice trembling, you can't mean this. I'm your mother. You can't just shut me out. Daniel didn't move. Mom, please, leave. Leave, she repeated. You'd throw me out for her after all I've done. She turned on Claire. You think you've won, don't you? You think taking my son makes you strong? Claire didn't flinch. I think respecting myself does. Lorraine's face hardened. You'll destroy him. You'll destroy this family. Daniel stepped forward, then his voice low but firm. Mom, stop. You destroyed it yourself. You came into our home and treated my wife like a servant. You made me choose between being your son and being a husband. I'm done. She stared at him like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. You'll regret this, she whispered. One day you'll see I was right. Maybe, he said, but at least I'll be free. She looked past him, her eyes meeting mine. For a moment, all the hatred drained away, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Then she turned and walked down the steps, her heels sinking into the gravel. The sound of her car engine starting was sharp and final. Claire exhaled shakily and sank against the doorframe. Daniel reached for her hand. It's over, he said. I stood behind them, watching, knowing better. No, I said softly. It's just beginning. Healing always starts after the door closes. They didn't answer, just held on to each other. The night swallowed the sound of Lorraine's car as it disappeared down the road. And for the first time, the house was truly theirs, quiet, fragile, free. A week passed before the house began to feel like home again. The silence that once felt heavy was now peaceful. Claire started opening the windows every morning, letting the light in, letting the air move through the rooms, like forgiveness. Daniel worked quietly beside her, fixing, cleaning, repairing small things he hadn't noticed before. They moved together like people learning a new language. One afternoon, I returned to visit. The guava tree had ripened, and the yard smelled faintly of fruit and wet soil. Claire was in the kitchen, kneading dough flour, dusting her hands. Daniel was outside, mending the fence. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. A real smile, not the one she used to wear like armor. Do you want coffee? She asked. Only if it's made for love, not obligation, I teased. She laughed, a soft, genuine sound that filled the kitchen with life. Everything here is made for love now. We sat at the table and talked about small things, the garden, her plans to start a baking business, the way Daniel had begun therapy to understand his mother's control. It felt like breathing after a long time underwater. But peace never comes without its tests. That evening, as the sun slipped behind the trees, Daniel came in holding his phone. His face was pale. "She wrote to me," he said quietly. He handed me the screen. It was a photograph of a handwritten letter. The first lines were shaky, the ink smudged as if by tears. "Daniel, I know you don't owe me a reply, but please listen once. I didn't realize how much I hurt you or Claire until your father told me the truth. I thought I was protecting you, but I was only protecting my power. I was wrong. I'm sorry. If forgiveness ever comes, I'll wait for it in silence." Under her name, there was a single sentence written smaller. "Tell Claire. I was wrong about her." Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he lowered the phone. "What do I do with this?" he asked. I looked at him, at the man who'd finally begun to see. "You do nothing for now. Let time decide whether her silence means peace or strategy. Either way, you protect your wife." He nodded slowly. "That's what I plan to do." Later after dinner, Claire handed me a small envelope. "I wrote her back," she said. I hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said. "It's not for her, it's for me." Her note was short. "Lorraine, I accept your apology, but forgiveness doesn't mean return. I hope you find peace, just not inside my home." I wanted to hug her and tell her how proud I was, but I didn't. Some victories need silence, the same kind of silence that once caged her, but now belonged to her. When I left that night, the sky was streaked with pink and gold, and I saw Daniel's arm around her shoulders as they stood on the porch. They looked small, but strong, two people rebuilding from the inside out. As I drove back to the city, I realized I wasn't worried anymore. Not about Lorraine's next move, not about whether the marriage would last. I had done what mothers are meant to do, not to save their children from every storm, but to remind them that they can survive one. Back in my apartment, I poured a cup of tea and sat by the window. The city lights blinked like tiny promises below me. I thought of my own mother, who once told me strength isn't about who shouts the loudest, it's about who stays standing when the shouting ends. She was right. Claire was standing now. So was Daniel in his own way. And Lorraine, perhaps, she was sitting somewhere, finally facing the reflection of her own cruelty. I hoped she'd learn something from it. But whether she did or not no longer mattered. I had seen my daughter reborn. And when I closed my eyes that night, I finally let myself rest, knowing that peace, once fought for, has to be lived quietly, day by day. A month later, I drove back to the acreage one last time. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky with colors too beautiful to belong to an ordinary evening. The gravel crunched under my tires, and I could already smell the faint sweetness of baked bread drifting from the kitchen window. Claire met me at the porch, her hands dusted with flour, her cheeks glowing from the oven's heat. "Mom," she said, smiling in that gentle, unguarded way she used to as a little girl, "you're just in time for dinner." Inside the house looked nothing like the battlefield it had been. The living room was warm, bright, full of life. On the table sat a freshly baked pie candles, flickering softly beside it. Daniel was setting plates. He turned and greeted me with quiet respect. The kind of respect that comes not from fear, but from understanding. As we ate, we talked about simple things, recipes, the garden, Claire's plans to sell her baked goods at the weekend market. Daniel listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was with care, as if every word mattered. I could see in his face that he was still rebuilding himself, still unlearning the lessons his mother had carved into him. But for the first time, I believed he might succeed. After dinner, Claire walked me to the porch. The night air was cool and fireflies glowed across the yard, like sparks of memory. She took my hand. "Mom," she said softly, "I never really thanked you for that day, for standing up when I couldn't." I squeezed her fingers. "You don't thank a mother for loving you," I said. "But you can promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll never apologize again for needing peace." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I promise." Daniel joined us, then slipping an arm around her shoulders. For a moment, the three of us stood in silence, looking out at the garden where everything had started and where everything had healed. When I finally left, I paused by my car and turned to look back. They stood together on the porch, the light behind them golden and soft. Claire leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder, and he kissed the top of her hair. They looked small against the wide night, but solid like two people who had chosen to fight for peace, not comfort. As I drove away, I thought about what that house had cost me. The years of saving the sleepless nights, the pain of watching my daughter break and rebuild. And I realized it had all been worth it, because that home wasn't just made of wood and brick. It was made of something far stronger: boundaries, dignity, and love. Love that no longer bows to anyone. When I reached the city lights, I whispered to the empty car, "We did it, sweetheart. You're free." And for the first time in years, I felt free too. Did you like this story? Which city are you listening from tonight? If you believe every mother has the right to protect her daughter's peace, leave a heart in the comments. And if this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe so I can bring you more real, powerful stories like this one.